I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk a little bit about trying to figure out Trump's reasoning with what's going on in Iran. And I think this is an interesting topic to tackle because there's a lot of theories, and everyone's trying to get inside Trump's head and figure out why did he not launch a strike against Iran. You know, what was his thinking? He was going to, or he was not going to. He had it all set up and then he pulled back. Why did he do this? Does Iran have leverage on him? You know, was Trump being, really genuine when he said he saw it was disproportionate to what happened with the drone? So there's a lot of theories floating around. A lot of people are citing anonymous sources and trying to get to the bottom of this. And I think you have some really good commentary on that. But let me start out the video with what Trump said was his reason for not launching missiles or launching some sort of retaliation against Iran for the drone strike. This is what Trump said. "We were cocked and loaded to retaliate last night on 3 different sites when I asked, 'How many will die?' 150 people, sir," was the answer from a general. 10 minutes from the strike, I stopped it. Not proportionate to shooting down an unmanned drone. And Trump made the same comment, I believe it was to Meet the Nation, I think.
That's
I
right.
think was the program. He made the same comment where he said it was just not proportionate to the shooting down. I think he said of a machine, a robot, a robotic plane. He actually phrased it like that.
Yeah.
Where he said that's for killing 150 people. That was his general's response to him. So, Alexander, what do you think of Trump's comment and of all the theories floating around on this?
Right. The first thing to say was when I read that comment, I immediately brought to my mind, something that Seymour Hersh, one of the greatest reporters in the United States, says 2 years ago, that he was told by a very senior official privately about Donald Trump. And I would add that Seymour Hersh, when he says he talks to senior officials, he is telling the truth. I mean, there are people who I am skeptical about, as you know, when they talk about high-level sources. Seymour Hersh, I believe him. Seymour Hersh said that this man told him that the thing to understand about Donald Trump is that he is both intelligent and kind. And those words have always stayed with me. And I think this is true. I think the way to get Donald Trump to do things, to do, frankly, often bad and misconceived things, is to play on his kindness by showing him photographs, as happened after the Han Sheikhoun attack, of children who have allegedly been gassed. That makes him very angry. And of course, we had another recent example of this when apparently he was shown by Gina Haspel, the CIA director, photos of poisoned children in order to get him to expel 60 Russian diplomats after the Salisbury incident. And I think that on this occasion, the moment he heard that actually 150 people would die, I think that there is a side of him which rebelled against this. I mean, understood the sheer inhumanity of doing something like this. And I think it played an important role in causing him to stop. But, of course, it is not the whole story. I think that Donald Trump does not want a war in the Middle East. He does not want a war with Iran. I think he understands the situation in the Gulf and in the Middle East and with Iran well enough to realize that if there was a war with Iran, it would be a potential huge disaster, that it wouldn't be just 150 people who might be killed. It might be many, many thousands if the thing escalated out of control. And I think that he also understands, and Donald Trump is a highly political person, that if there is a major war in the Middle East, it would affect his chances of re-election, because his electoral base voted for him as somebody who would end the wars and would not be happy both to see another war in which American lives were placed at risk or might be lost, and in which, if there was an interruption to the flow of oil, his electoral base would have to pay oil at $150, $250 a barrel, I've heard, and astronomic figures. So I think both an emotional reaction from Trump when he was told that people would die because a robot might be shot down, and I think he generally felt this was disproportionate and wrong at many levels, and a political calculation that this was not in his interests and not in the interests of the United States.
I think your comments, Alexander, are going to be very controversial because you're taking a very different approach in that you're saying that Trump, and according to Seymour Hersh, who I think you don't get, any better of a journalist than Seymour Hersh, who made the statement that Trump is kind and intelligent, and you think a lot of his decision is based on how Seymour Hersh read Trump's personality. That is, I mean, I could see the people in comments saying, "Are you out of your mind, Trump? Kind and intelligent?"
Yes. I think. Well, as I said, this is what a person on the National Security Council, a senior U.S. official who has worked with Trump for some time now, that is the assessment that he has made, and apparently it is shared by other people who work with Trump closely. The great problem with Donald Trump, if I can say so, I'm not sure it's a problem, is that, of course, he has his personality, which is a larger-than-life personality. He goes on Twitter, he says things when he meets the people, when he goes out and meets the people. He can be very brash, he can be very vulgar, he can be very outspoken, he can be extraordinarily rude and offensive, though never, in my opinion, without some calculation and some understanding of what he would achieve by it. But I don't think he is, in his person, a violent and bloodthirsty man. There is nothing about his career that suggests to me that he is. I mean, compare this personality with Barack Obama, who every morning apparently used to go over the lists of people that the drones would take out and rationalize that, as sort of controlling the process, of the drone killings, but unquestionably was playing God by doing so. I don't think Donald Trump likes to play God in that kind of way. So, though it's controversial, and no doubt many people won't agree with me, as I said, it does come with very good authority from someone who undoubtedly did speak to Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh is a reliable reporter, and I personally give credit to it.
I agree with you on that. I'm watching the interview with Trump when he explained it. Maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm too trusting. Yeah. My take on it, looking at Trump, I think he was genuine in the way he explained it. Now, going off of that, which is, taking Trump at his word, where he said 150 people dying is, not proportionate to what happened with the drone. Get into some other theories that people have as to why, Trump didn't launch a more heavy-handed attack against Iran.
Yes, well, I mean, there's been lots of theories. I mean, there's been one theory, which I've seen on the moon of Alabama, which is that he never apparently or supposedly planned to launch any kind of strike on Iran at all, and that this was all part of some, attempt to give the impression that there would be a strike, so as to play a kind of bluff, but that there was never really any plan to call the strike. I mean, I have to say, I don't believe that. Donald Trump himself has said there was a strike, or a strike which was planned. I've no doubt that there really was a plan to carry out a strike. I think that he was put under intense pressure by people around him, like Bob Bolton, Pompeo, Gina Haspel, all sorts of other people within the US government who were trying to get him to attack Iran because, frankly, many of them want a war with Iran. I think at many levels, and I mean, I talked about his emotional response to the attack on the drone, but I think he understands better, perhaps, than his advisors do, the enormity of such a step, of going to war with Iran. And I think he was never keen on the whole idea of a strike on Iran. And I think that the more he thought about it, the more he thought it was a bad idea, because of the reasons I said, because of the way it could escalate out of control, because of the way his electoral base would dislike it, because of the thousands of people who might be killed, because of the effect on the price of oil. And I think that was the reason, that was the ultimate reason he pulled back. There is another theory I've seen, which is one, which again, I can't credit my Elijah Manier, who is a very well-known commentator on Middle East affairs, that this was all somehow plotted between the Iranians and the Americans, and that the Americans suggested to the Iranians, we'll launch a strike at Iran on some targets, Iranian targets, which Iran itself has selected in order to help Donald Trump and the US administration save face as they now look for a diplomatic settlement with Iran. I find that far too complicated. I think that's, in fact, I think that's, to be honest, an outlandish theory. I think if the Iranians were ever received that kind of message, and I don't believe they did, and who in the US government, in all seriousness, would pass on a message like that, I think the Iranians would say to themselves, the Americans are crazy. And I think if Donald Trump ever suggested such a thing to any of his officials, they would have told him, Mr. President, that is just too absurd, and there's no way we can do a thing like that. I mean, the Iranians would laugh at us, and we'd end up losing more face instead of saving any.
Yeah, you mentioned the pressure that Trump was under within his White House. He's also facing a lot of pressure in the media. And he's also facing it in the alternative media from a lot of people that claim to be or say they're, part of the conservative or the conservative right movement in the United States. But they're also very bloodthirsty for a war with Iran. I'm going to read you a tweet from Ben Shapiro with the Daily Wire, and then I'm going to read you what Paul Joseph Watson, formerly of InfoWars, now with Summit News, he has his own publication, Summit News, his response to Shapiro. And here's Ben Shapiro's tweet. Number 1, no one wants war with Iran. Number 2, deterrence is a valuable strategy in both preventing full-scale war and curbing aggression. Number 3, deterrence requires the credible threat of disproportionate force. And number 4, confusion and vacillation undermine deterrence. And here's Paul Joseph Watson's reply to Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is a complete fraud. What truly pro-life person would get mad over Trump not slaughtering hundreds of people to avenge a flying robot? Unfollow at Ben Shapiro en masse. What do you make of these two young media stars and their comments here on what's going on in Iran?
I'm completely with Watson. I mean, I think he's absolutely right. I think he's talking sense, and Ben Shapiro is talking nonsense. And what Ben Shapiro is saying is that, a resort to disproportionate force is somehow justified, even though, by the way, disproportionate force is a war crime. It's actually contrary to international law to use disproportionate force in that way. And if force becomes too disproportionate, it begins to look like aggression. And of course, there are many people around who would say that that kind of attack on Iran would be aggression. Now, I understand that there are many, many people in the United States who don't like Iran. I understand that Iran has been seen by many people in the United States as a hostile country ever since the Iranians, during the Iranian Revolution in 1979, invaded the US embassy and took the diplomatic staff, the American diplomatic staff there, hostage. And, I understand the sense of grievance that many Americans still have about that, and how hostility to Iran has become hardwired within the US political system. But all obsessions are dangerous. You have to think rationally and in a calculated way when you make your decisions. Iran is not a threat to the United States. The US intelligence community has been saying since 2007 that Iran is not developing a nuclear bomb. Iran does not at the moment have the wherewithal to create a nuclear bomb. It is not a threat to Israel or to any of the United States' other allies in the Middle East. It does have the means to defend itself up to a point, but it does not have the kind of military forces that Israel and the United States do, not by any conceivable measure. And contrary to what is often said, it is not the major sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East. It is not Shia militias or Shia terrorists that are killing Americans or Westerners or carrying out attacks like 9/11 on US territory. Those people were Sunnis. In the case of the 9/11 terrorists, all but one of them was Saudi, and Saudi Arabia, as everyone who follows the Middle East closely, has been the major sponsor of jihadi violence in order to pursue its foreign policy objectives in the Middle East, which with much of that jihadi violence directed against Iran. So Iran, I can understand why people don't like it, but it is not a danger to the United States. It is not committing aggression against the United States. It is defending itself. And for the United States to get itself involved with a powerful country that is defending itself but is no threat to the United States, as people like Ben Shapiro and Sean Hannity and others are demanding, is beyond reckless. We should listen to people like like Watson, and we should listen to Donald Trump himself, the president of the United States, who made the correct decision.
Yeah, and we said it in a previous video, and I'll say it again. I'd like your comments on it again, Alexander. I was in Moscow at the time when Turkey shot down the Russian jet over Syria, which was manned. It was a manned jet, and Turkey did shoot it down. People did die. And when I was in Moscow, I was walking. I remember I was in Kuznetsky Most. I was in the center of the city when it happened. And, you were talking to people. And no one, even though people were saying, yes, we have to respond. But it was in the sense of respond in a diplomatic way, take some sort of, proportionate, action, but no taking of life. I mean, that's how people were saying. No one was demanding war. No one was even talking of war with Turkey in Moscow at the time, or in Russia when that happened. I don't even think it was on the table among the population and the media, we're going to go to war with Turkey. It was, we're going to have to respond, yes, but we're going to have to figure out the right response without escalating this thing.
Exactly, because Russians have great experience of war. Of the Soviet Union, Russia's predecessor country, lost 27 million people defeating the Germans. They understand war very well. Russian history has been full of war, and they understand how dangerous war is. So they understand that responses to these kind of events, like the shooting down of the Su-24 with 2 Russian pilots killed, have to be proportionate, because if they are disproportionate, they backfire. They create more escalation, they spread violence, and they, in the end, cause damage to the country, to Russia in that case. And what the Russians, in fact, did was that they imposed certain sanctions on Turkey, not all embracing sanctions,
I
but
believe on tourism
certain
mainly.
on tourism mainly. That hurt the Turks, but it left the door open to the Turks for the Turks to seek a compromise and a solution. And within about a year, Erdogan was apologizing to the Russians, saying he was sorry for what had happened, offering to make things up. And now relations between Russia and Turkey have become very close, to the point where the Russians are actually selling their S-400 missile system to Turkey. That is how a great power conducts diplomacy, not by shooting from the hip, not by dropping bombs, not by fostering violence and making your enemy, your adversary, even more angry, to the point where they do become a genuine enemy. You work with them. Obviously, you respond to what they do, but you don't overreact. You act in a measured and calculated way. And that is what a great power like Russia did with the Su-24. And that's what the United States should do in its relations with Iran.
Right. And so far, it looks like Trump is taking the right approach so far.
Yes,
Correct?
yes, it is. But of course, the problem with Trump is that he is surrounded by people who are demanding action against him. I read somewhere, I forget where, but I read it today, somebody saying, a political system where the voice of reason and peace in the United States government is Donald Trump, and it seems no one else, is a very dysfunctional system. There is no actual pushback against the demand for war. The Republicans seem to want it. Many of Donald Trump's media supporters are disappointed that he didn't do it. And the Democrats, many Democrats, seem to be keen on this war also. It's a very dangerous situation. And one wonders how far Donald Trump can resist this pull towards war. But, he should be commended for finding the courage at the last minute, or rather in the last 10 minutes, to call a stop. I mean, can I just say something else about Ben Shapiro? Ben Shapiro is wrong, in my opinion, to talk about confusion and indecision at the top of government. On the contrary, as anybody who follows US politics knows very well, it is the decision not to go to war, which is the difficult one, and which is often politically the most difficult one. And it requires courage to stop, and Donald Trump showed courage by calling a stop.
I agree with you on that one, Alexander. And just to bring it back to the Russian example, because I think it is very close and parallel to what happened. The Russian one was much more serious, actually, much more serious.
Oh.
You have, on the one hand, Trump surrounded by Pompeo and Bolton, and on the other hand, you have a Vladimir Putin seeking the advice of a Sergei Lavrov.
Well, it is Sergei Lavrov and Shoigu, his defense minister, all these people, very intelligent, measured people.
Team makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference. And of course, the media in Russia, as you correctly said, were not looking for war. And for Russia, as you rightly said, the stakes were much higher. It was early on in Russia's intervention in Syria. The Turkish military were on the border in Syria and potentially posing a big threat to Russia. It could have very easily, for the Russians, gone horribly wrong if they'd got themselves into a clash with Turkey. And at the same time, in other situations, one can imagine people saying, well, the Turks are a threat to us, they're shooting down our planes, our people in Syria are at risk. If you follow the Ben Shapiro logic, this is why we, the Russians, need to carry out a disproportionate response against Turkey. And the Russians didn't do that. As you rightly say, nobody suggested it. At street level, people weren't talking about it. In the corridors of power, people weren't talking about it. And in the end, it turned out well for Russia.
Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, thank you very much for that analysis. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Click on that notifications bell. Hit that like button. Go to the Duran shop. Buy a t-shirt. Pick up a magic mug. You have those magic mugs. Those magic mugs will help you make the right decisions in life when you are feeling pressure and you have to find some courage. Drink from those magic mugs. Alexander, a few words about the mugs and the long sleeve shirt that you have on today.
Indeed. Well, we have to find courage to come out on these programs every day, don't we, Alex? And we find courage and refreshment and inspiration by drinking from these beautiful mugs, which are really beautiful. I mean, you cannot conceive how beautiful they are to hold. And they have our logo. This one has our logo. This is my own mug with our double-headed eagle logo pointing to the east and the west, where we are looking in both directions. And they're big mugs, 15 ounces.
15 ounces, yeah.
Yeah, you can drink a lot of tea from them, as I do. By the way, I should say today I was drinking green tea from them, so there you are. Which is invigorating. Sometimes another tea I drink a lot, by the way, is jasmine pearl, and that was the tea I drank this morning. It's a very refreshing tea. It acts like a stimulus, like coffee. So you can drink coffee, you can drink hot chocolate. Several times now I've drunk beer from this mug, and it works. It really works very well for beer. And this is the other mug that I have. Actually, I have to give it back after this video because it's my wife's mug. She sort of appropriated it for herself because she likes it so much. And it's the coat of arms of Moscow, which is also, of course, the double-headed eagle. And there you see St. George on his horse, the warrior for truth. And he's fighting the dragon of untruth and fake news, which is what we aim to do at the Duran. So it felt very appropriate for us to have this logo on one of our beautiful mugs. And there it is. And you will have great joy of one of these mugs if you buy one. And you will help us also. You will help the Duran so that we can continue to give you the inspiring programs that we are able to do because we get refreshed so well from drinking from them. And as you rightly say, Alex, I'm wearing a long-sleeved T-shirt. Long-sleeve T-shirts, by the way, in my experience, if they're not really good, can be rather unpleasant. This is not just pleasant; it is beautiful. It is
long-sleeve in July. In June.
Yeah, well, there we go. This is London. You know, London is that kind of the weather here is highly changeable. It's a beautiful 100% cotton shirt. It's incredibly comfortable to wear. It's very, very, very stylish. I wear it outdoors and indoors with equal comfort. It fits beautifully. My wife loves it. My wife was skeptical when I told her I was getting a long sleeve T-shirt, but she absolutely loves it. She thinks it's fantastic. The color is great. By the way, it's always a sign of a really good shirt if it's got a good color, a good solid, stable color like this one. It shows you that you're dealing with a good material, which it is. This is 100% cotton, and a good dye, which is this also. And of course, if I can just show people, it's got our logo there. So there's our logo, the embroidered logo, the double-headed eagle, which is really great. So it's a gorgeous shirt. You will love wearing it. If you want to help us and help yourself, buy one.
All right. Then you can also help us by donating to us on PayPal, Patreon, and now Subscribestar as well. So the links are in the description box down below. And you can get a copy of this video in audio format. Follow us on iTunes and on Soundcloud. And finally, to wrap it up, Alexander, we have an ebook on Brexit, but we're going to have a couple of ebooks coming out on Russiagate. I'll put the link for the ebook on Brexit in the description box as well.
Yeah.
You wrote the foreword to the Brexit one. You're going to write the foreword to the 2 ebooks that are going to be coming out on Russiagate. Yeah. Very quickly, some quick words on that, and we'll wrap up this video.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we're doing ebooks now is because they actually enable us to distill the analysis that we do in our videos, and to put them all in one place, which is easily accessible in an ebook. And on the Brexit side, you can see exactly how we got Brexit entirely right. We were saying right from the outset that if the British elite didn't deliver Brexit, there would be a political crisis in Britain, and there would be a political force in Britain which would sweep the country outside London, and that is exactly what has happened with the rise of the Brexit Party. And in order to understand why Brexit has become so complicated, you need also to understand that there is nothing actually fundamentally complicated about Brexit. It is simply the British people wanting to leave the European Union. What has made it complicated is that their own political elite has set out to sabotage what the British people voted for in a democracy. When that happens in a democracy, when the will of the people becomes sabotaged, the entire political system becomes distorted, and things that are actually very simple start to look and appear very complicated. And if Brexit looks complicated but is really simple, Russiagate is even more complicated, even though in some ways it is even more simple. I mean, Russiagate was also a conspiracy to set aside the result of a democratic election. That democratic election in the United States was the one which took place in 2016, which Donald Trump constitutionally won. But some people, a lot of people in the American political establishment and in the deep state didn't want that, weren't happy about it, and set about either stopping Trump from winning or reversing his victory, or if they couldn't do that, delegitimizing him. So the way they did that was by concocting this extraordinary, elaborate conspiracy, which again, we at the Duran got right from the start, way back in 2016, even before the election. We were saying that there is no truth to this story of Donald Trump being any kind of Siberian candidate or Russian agent. This whole thing is a concocted story, a fabrication. And we outlined it in our articles, in our videos, and we're now going to bring it all together and set it out in 2 ebooks for you.
Okay, Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.